Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. In 2009, Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. And in that book, he starts with a fundamental question. Why are some people and organizations more innovative, more influential, and more profitable than others? Why do some command greater loyalty from customers and employees? And even among the successful, why are so few able to repeat their success over and over? People like Martin Luther King Jr., Steve Jobs, and the Wright brothers have very little in common, but they all started with why. They realized that people won't truly buy into a product, service, movement, or idea until they understand the why behind it. Well, that book turned into a movement, and today Simon's 2 TED Talks have more than 40 million views, and the book has sold more copies every single year for the past 9 years than the year before. Well, today, Simon joins us to talk about the process they use to help leaders like you and I discover our why and effectively communicate it to the world. If you're feeling lost, if you're feeling unsure or uninspired about your life, your work, or your future, start with why. If you own a company and you want to create a world-class brand with an incredibly loyal customer base, start with why. And if you need help figuring out your why, well, you can start with this episode of Self-Made Man. As always, thank you for listening, and here is Simon Sinek. All right, welcome back, everybody. Mike Dillard here, and we are joined by a gentleman who's had a huge influence on my life over the years, and I'm extremely excited to share his message with you here today. So welcome to the show, Mr. Simon Sinek.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely, brother. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to for a few weeks now since we put it on the calendar. I'm extremely grateful for your time today and to help introduce you to this audience. And I have a feeling there's quite a few people who are listening who may not have been introduced to your work yet. So I think this is going to be extremely valuable for everybody. So I think the best place for us to start would be with the movement and kind of the mini revolution you started back in 2009 in corporate America and startups with your book called Start With Why. For those who are not familiar with that and with your message, could you start there and kind of sum that up for everybody over the next 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, I learned a bunch of years ago that all the great and inspiring leaders, everybody from Steve Jobs to Martin Luther King, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone, to the rest of us. When you ask somebody, what do? They usually tell you what they do. They tell you what their job is, what their company does, what products they sell. But all of these great and inspiring leaders and organizations, every single one of them don't tell you what they do, they tell you why they do it. And so what I learned is that I call it the golden circle. Imagine 3 concentric circles. On the outside is what, on the middle level is how, on the inside is why. Every single one of us knows what we do. Some of us know how we do it, but very, very few of us know why we do what we do. And really, to really inspire people, we really have to know why we do what we do. And it changed my life when I discovered my why, and I've committed myself to sharing that idea with as many people as possible.
And what was the why that you discovered for you personally?
I wake up every single day to inspire people to do what inspires them. So together, each of us can change our world for the better.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've got a couple of TED Talks that you've done, well over 40 million views combined now between the 2 videos. And I spent the morning rewatching both of those. And you gave a couple of examples on the golden circle that I think would be really helpful to people to grasp this concept. And one of them, it was the difference between, Apple and every other computer company out there like Dell. Could you walk us through that real quick?
Yeah. I mean, Apple does not define themselves by what they do. They define themselves by why they do it, to challenge the status quo, to think different. And everything they do is committed to that idea of giving the individual the power to stand up to Big Brother. And so because they define themselves by their cause, it gives them permission to go into all kinds of other industries. So Apple sells us, small electronics, and they started selling us iPods a bunch of years ago. And then they started selling us phones, and now they sell us TV, equipment and stuff like that, DVRs. Dell always defined themselves by what they do. We make great computers. And they would differentiate themselves based on memory and screen size and things like that. And we were never clear what their cause was. Dell is a perfectly smart company, And it's perfectly capable of making every single product that Apple makes. The problem is no one would buy a phone from Dell. It doesn't make sense. Dell tried to come out with MP3 players. They tried to come out with back when the iPod was a thing, they tried to come out with a competition and nobody bought it. Because why would we buy a music player from a computer company? Except we do it every day. And this is really the genius of organizations that define themselves by their why, which is not only do they have much more focus, not only are they more innovative, but they have permission to follow marketplaces like few other companies do.
So this really helps on an internal perspective and an external perspective. Internally, on how a founder or CEO can lead their team, and an external perspective on how a company can essentially lead their customer base. Can you walk us through the process that you've laid out in your books on how we discover what our why is?
Well, a why is ostensibly an origin story. So every individual has a why. We only have one why. It is the sum total of who we are and the experiences we have when we're younger. And that forms us into our personalities. It forms us into who we are. And the rest of our lives are simply opportunities to live in balance with that why or not. Organizations are the same. Great organizations are built upon a real problem that someone or someone close to them suffered, and the solution they found was the root of their company. You know, great companies are not born out of somebody who read about an opportunity in a magazine and attempted to recreate it, because there's no passion for that. And so you find your why by looking backwards and trying to identify both the times where you were operating at your natural best and even some of the times that you struggled. And there's a pattern that exists. There's a golden thread that runs through all of those highs, and that's the why. It's sort of a remarkable thing to uncover. I wrote Start With Why a bunch of years ago, and the biggest complaint I get on that book is that I made a compelling argument for this thing called the why, but I didn't tell anybody how to find it. So, the good news is 8 years later, we finally came out with a book called Find Your Why, which was designed for individuals, entrepreneurs, and teams within large companies. So that it's basically a companion guide that goes with Start With Why to help people go through the process of uncovering and discovering their why.
I think you'd probably agree with this, but if someone's out there listening to this, because that's who our audience is entrepreneurs, people who are thinking about starting a business, you're thinking about starting a new company, even launching a new product, building your first team, to me, this is where you start. This is at the bottom of the foundation that everything else is built upon. And it's unbelievably important that it's constantly communicated to both your team and your customers, because I'll speak for myself. I have a tendency to take it for granted and to assume that my team members know what our why is and why we're getting up and going to work every single day. But that can tend to not be the case sometimes.
Absolutely. And that will plague somebody for years. I've spoken to some very, very successful entrepreneurs, and they tell me, Simon, I don't need to know my why. And I say, well, why is that? They say, because it's crystal clear to everybody around me. And literally their senior executives are sitting right next to us nodding no. And this is one of the hard things. Just because it's obvious to you doesn't mean it's obvious to everybody else. You built your business based on gut feelings. Well, we need to know what's in that gut. And unfortunately, most entrepreneurs are really, really bad at explaining in words that the rest of us can understand what their true inspiration is. And they talk about building and they talk about being your own boss. That's not a why. Every entrepreneur on the planet has that in common. It's something deeply, deeply personal based on who you are and your own experiences. And I'm talking, some really remarkable human beings whose work we all know. They're some of the famous ones who literally do not get that unless they write it down and put it into words that people can understand, that eventually their company will not be the company that they originally built, which we've seen happen so many times. We saw it happen with Walmart. After a bunch of CEOs, that company is not the company that Sam Walton founded. We're starting to see kinks in the armor of companies that we love now that they're on their second or third CEO. And it's not that these CEOs are bad people. It's that no one clearly lit the torch and told them what torch they're to carry. So they just run the business, quote unquote, as opposed to advancing the cause.
Do you think this is a concern at Apple these days?
I think Apple is starting to show some cracks in the armor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone who's a fan of Apple and even who works for the company will admit it. I don't think it's dire. We're not at that point yet. It's not like Walmart where we loved the company and then we hated the company, But I think they're definitely following more than they're leading. you know? They used to dictate what the market would make next, and now they're sort of sometimes catching up a little bit. Their innovations don't seem that innovative anymore. And I think it's become much more numbers focused than it used to be. But it's not, it's still a great company, of course. And of course, I'm still a fan, but there's a couple cracks.
Are there some case studies from companies that you've worked with through this process that have some phenomenal stories, either for the better or worse, that you could share?
It's an uncomfortable conversation. I probably am shooting myself on the foot here, but I really hate talking about them. I mean, the answer is yes. I can tell you stories of amazing things that happened at companies I worked with, but I'm always uncomfortable taking credit because they made the decisions, and if they used their why and they used our work, I'm flattered and honored, but it's a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and I think they deserve the credit. It's kind of like ad agencies, an advertising campaign runs, and if the client does well, the agency takes all the credit. And if the client does badly, the agency blames market conditions. You can't have it both ways. So I think my clients deserve the credit, to be quite honest.
No, and that's completely fair. I think I love hearing stories about that because when you do it cements and inspires you to say, okay, this is something I really need to invest in and spend time on. So from that perspective, if you have the knack, that would be, I think that'd be really interesting. Now, changing gears just a little bit here, I've, known of you for, since 2009, frankly, when the book came out. We had a chance to have dinner with a group of friends one time after an event that you were speaking at many, many years ago. And I've always followed your career with a little bit of fascination, just, I guess, from your journey as an entrepreneur. And I wanted to see if we could dive into your progression or evolution, if you will, as a thought leader in business, who's had the kind of success that you've had. What has that process been like for you?
It's humbling. I'm a messenger for something I believe in, and I've stayed the course, and I've followed the advice that I give. Like start with why is the playbook that I have followed. And if you just look at the books, for example, like my books sell differently than most books. The way most books sell is they spike, they go down, the paperback comes out, they spike again, and then they go down again. And if you're really lucky, you'll have a sort of steady sales for a bunch of years, if you're really lucky. If you look at Start With Why, it's just a steady incline. That's all it is. And it's sold more books every single year that it's been out than the previous year. And when people say, how did you do it? Because I've done it with zero advertising, zero marketing dollars, and zero PR. It has yet to be reviewed by any major newspaper, and I've never had a conversation about Start With Why on any major TV show. It's all organic. It's all word of mouth. And because I preach what I believe, and everything that I do talks about why I do what I do, people who believe what I believe go looking for my work, or people who believe what I believe will know my work and share it with a friend. My TED Talk gets shared with more people than just organic TEDsters watching it. Somebody emails it to somebody and says, you got to watch this. Or somebody tells them about the book. And this is why it works, because I've treated my business not like a business. I've treated it like a social movement. And so I was never confined by the annual trajectory. I had goals, but I was much more interested in the trend rather than the absolutes. I'm not interested in a roller coaster where I just happen to make an arbitrary number on an arbitrary date, even though it's up and down, up and down, up and down for a year before. I'm much more interested in steady growth, steady, stable growth. And like I said, that's like a social movement.
When you first wrote the book, did you write it because you felt compelled that you had a message that you just needed to get out to the world, and then that was the end of your expectations? Or were you writing the book with the intention of this kind of being the foundation for a longer term vision as far as what you wanted to do from a career standpoint?
Neither. I tripped over this thing called the golden circle, the concept of why. I had lost my passion for what I was doing. I had a small marketing consultancy, and superficially my life was really good. And I fell out of love with my work, and I was embarrassed by that because, woe is me. I had great clients, we did great work, and I made a decent living, and I didn't want to admit that I was unhappy. So I kept it to myself. And all of my energy went into pretending that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I actually felt, which is really a bad place to be. And it wasn't until a friend of mine came to me concerned about my health, concerned about me, did I admit that something was wrong, which was a weight off my shoulders, which gave me the courage to then find a solution. And the solution I found was this thing called the why. And I shared it with my friends, and they started making crazy life changes. And my friends invited me to their homes, and I literally would stand in people's living rooms and give this why talk. And people just kept inviting me to talk about it, and I just kept saying yes. So I was giving the speech of the why long before there was a book, for years, for 2 or 3 years. And somebody who I knew said, you really should write a book. And I shrugged my shoulders and said, okay. I'd never imagined writing a book. Somebody introduced me to a publisher. It happened to be the god of business publishing. Adrian Zackheim was the original publisher from Good to Great. He even came up with the title. And I had one meeting with him, and 3 days later, he gave me a book deal. So the reason I wrote the book is because I had a contract that told me I had to. But I was fully aware that what a book can do, it allows me to go into depth of a concept that I can't do speaking. And it allows my idea to spread way, way beyond the number of people I can put in an audience and let people sit with the idea. I was fully aware of the value of spreading a message and using all media available. And I will use all media available to spread the message.
What has been the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome when it comes to growing your personal business?
I think it's just dealing, sort of staying true to what I believe and the vision that I have. And let me be clear about my vision. I imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe when they're there, and return home fulfilled at the end of the day. That is the world I'm trying to build. It is not the world we live in now. And so I think one of the biggest challenges I had was judging myself based on traditional metrics and traditional ways of doing business. Traditional businesses want to know how fast you're growing. But speed was less important to me than the organic nature. I needed other people. I needed an army to help spread my message. I couldn't do it alone. Traditional people want to know, what your total revenues are. And I was much more interested in the number of people I was able to connect with, which unfortunately is not always easily calculable. I can count how many people watch a TED Talk, and I can count how many people buy a book, but I don't know that they read the book. And I don't know what people are saying when there's no book or TED Talk involved. I don't know the conversations people are having. These are incalculable things. So I became comfortable with the idea that I cannot measure everything that I care about. And I knew that the only way I could do it was sticking to it. The analogy would be like eating healthy or going to the gym. Like if you want to get into shape, you cannot get into shape by going to the gym for 9 hours, But unfortunately, that's how a lot of businesses treat their business. They do one big thing, or it's one big effort, or it's a new campaign, or it's a new product, or it's a new launch, or it's a new whatever it is, and they try and get the business really going with this one big thing that they're betting the farm on. But you can't do that. That's not how it works. I treated it more like if you work out every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape. The problem is I don't know when. I know it will take longer than a week, but I know that it won't take a year either. I just don't know when. And for different people, it takes different amount of time. So I treated it like that. I knew all of the science and theories of how social movements work, and I treated my work the same way. And I knew that consistency and just sticking with it was way more important than some flash in the pan to spread my message and build things. And I stuck with it, and I stuck with it, and I stuck with it. And people would look at me and be like, but you're not doing well. Well, you could look at me after working out for a week and say that it's not worth it either. It's the same thing. But I knew, just like every single one of us knows, 100% if you work out every day for 20 minutes, you will 100% get into shape. We know that instinctively. Well, I knew that instinctively. If I stuck to it, it would work. And that's all I've done and continue to do.
And I think it's the perfect illustration, for starting with why, right? I think it describes the difference between meaning and means, where you are basing your actions and business decisions on around the meaning of your message, your why, and everything that motivates you to pursue, the career that you have, versus means, which I think you were describing earlier, when businesses and business owners make decisions because, frankly, they need money, right? Like, hey, we need to launch a new product, or we need to go into a new vertical because we need to increase revenue, whether it's for their investors or to pay their bills or whatever it may be. But that just serves as a distraction and a potential pitfall that they can fall into, where you've been completely focused on meaning, and it's allowed you to stay on this singular path over time, which has allowed you to, frankly, just accumulate, compounding results of your brand and your message.
A business to me is like a car, and money is like fuel, right? Money makes a business go, and money is really important. Because you can make the most beautiful company, but if you don't have money to make it go, then then it goes nowhere and the company goes bankrupt. And what's the value in that, right? But the problem is that the reason we buy a car is so we can go places. And you have to know where you're going. That's what vision is. It's knowing where you want to drive. And the problem is the way most businesses run is that car exists solely to buy gas, and all people do is look at the gas gauge and talk about how much gas they have, where I'm talking about where I'm going. I'm not an idiot. I know that money is important. I know that I have to put gas in the car, but all of the other people I talk to, they keep telling me how much gas they have, but they don't tell me where they're going.
Yeah, it's a trap that you can fall into pretty easily, But I think that's why this is so important. So you've got the first book, Start With Why. You've got the one that's just come out this year, which is essentially how to find your why. Can you go over some of the basic steps of that process that you outline in the book at maybe a 50,000-foot level?
Well, like I said before, it's about identifying patterns. And one of the things we do in Find Your Why, depending on whether you're an individual, small business, or a team within a large company, is we take you through a process in which you write stories of all the highs and lows, and you find the patterns. And, I'm a humanist. I believe in human beings and relationships, and I believe that everything goes better when we're in safe relationships, whether at home or at work. And so we encourage people to have a partner when they do this, somebody who's an objective outsider who can help you identify the patterns. The amazing thing is, and I'm really proud of this, this is not like some 6-month research thing. I always get a kick out of companies who help. They're like, we'll help you find your why. It's 6 months worth of research, and we're going to talk to all your customers, and it's just a waste of money and time. Whether it's with the book that we wrote, or whether it's the way we actually do it when we help people, it can be done in as little time as a day. But the book will probably take a weekend, 2-3 days, to really get some clarity, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was our vision that we would help as many people as possible. People thought we were stupid because these kinds of processes you can sell for $1,500 online, and we wrote a book for like $20,
Yeah.
And I think, and depending on the online discounts, you can probably get it for like 12. I love that. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah. So if you could you expand a little bit on the process and what people could expect?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a hack. How's that?
Perfect.
I call it the friends test, and we offer it in the book as a test to verify your work, but it works pretty well to get you in the ballpark. Go to your friends, your best friends, the people who you love and they love you, that you pick up the phone at 3:00 in the morning if they called, and they do the same for you no matter what. And ask them the simple question: why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy, right? And it's not that they don't know the answer. It's that the answer exists in the part of the brain that controls our feelings but doesn't control language. It's called the limbic brain, right? It's responsible for all of our feelings, all of our decisions, but it has no control over language. And so then you switch. You stop asking why, ironically, and you start asking the question, what? Come on, what is it about me that we're such close friends? What is it about me that I know you'd be there for me no matter what? And they'll start describing you. You're funny, I can trust you, you've always been there for me. And you have to play devil's advocate. You can't help them, you can't let anybody else help them. And you say, that's the definition of a friend. What is it about me that I know you'd be there for no matter what? And again, they'll keep describing you. And you have to let them sweat and keep playing devil's advocate. And at some point, they'll give up. At some point, they'll stop describing you and they'll start describing themselves. And this is what my friends told me. They said, Simon, I don't know. All I know is I can just sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you and I feel inspired. And I got goosebumps. In other words, I had an emotional reaction to something they said. I had an emotional reaction to the value I have in their lives. That's your why. That's your why. And you can do it with multiple friends and they'll all say the same thing. Many will even say the same words. And you know that you're there when you have an emotional reaction. You might well up, or you might your eyes might, light up, or you might get goosebumps, whatever it is. You will definitely feel something. And that's your value in their lives. And that's now the thing you have to give to as many people as possible, both in your products, your services, and as a friend, as a spouse, as a father or mother or brother or sister or son or daughter. Like that is your value in the world. That is the value inside your company. So
let's dive into what a specific example of that message might look like when you're taking it out to the marketplace, right? So, I spent a couple of hours this morning actually writing a new set of ad copy for our products and our Facebook ad agency. And, I have this first draft that I spent an hour or two on, and then I rewatched your video and I'm like, crap, I need to start over and essentially start over with, the why perspective, from my customers. Can you give us an example of what that kind of messaging looks like from a practical, tactical standpoint.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so let's talk about me, Simon, what do you do? Well, I'm a writer and a speaker, and I write books about leadership and inspiration and how to inspire people, and I give talks on the same thing. And it's all about advancing this vision of creating a world that's different and better than the one we live in now, because, I want to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. That's starting with what and getting to why, right? Now let's just reverse it. Everything I do is devoted to one idea and one idea only, to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. So together, each of us can change our world for the better. And I do many, many things to advance that message. I speak, I write, I teach. But the point is no matter what I do, it's always to inspire people to do what inspires them. So instead of people who are looking to buy a book or looking to have a speech, what you do is talking to people who believe what you believe. And then the question is, well, how do I want to engage with this person, or what can I do? And you can do this for absolutely any product. You can do it for absolutely anything, but you have to know your why. It cannot be generic, because as soon as they engage with you, if your products, your services, your people, your advertising doesn't pay off what you're promising, then it's dead in the water. Then it was just marketing, right? It's got to be true to who you are.
Yeah, that's wheels are turning for sure. So from a process standpoint, what does everybody else really need to know, I think, that we haven't covered yet, right? If they're going to grasp this and then implement it, obviously the books are going to walk them through this in detail and kind of step by step. But is there any part of it that we haven't covered yet today?
I mean, as I said before, it's about pattern recognition. It's about going backwards. The friends test is really fun. I really encourage people to try it. It's fun to watch your friends sweat.
I got to tell you, I think I find that personally a little bit intimidating. Like I'd be kind of scared to go do that. I don't know why, but that's the reaction I'm having around it.
You'll find it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely puts both people in a pretty vulnerable spot, which I'm just like, man, that'd be intense. That'd be really intense.
These are your close friends, so
yeah,
the people to be vulnerable with.
Right. Sorry, I interrupted you. So we've got that test to start with. Anything else?
Again, it's about pattern recognition, and it's about all the different ways in which you can identify those patterns. And it's really about going through your life. It's a little bit like, as I said, about working out. Like, it takes a little bit of work. There's no answering 3 questions and it spits it out of a computer. This is a human process, and everybody's a little bit different. And some people are quicker, and some people are slower. But it's really magical when people find it. We've heard so many stories of people being drawn to tears when they're looking face to face and they're confronted with who they are, and you discover why people love you. It can be a really beautiful process.
Absolutely. Well, this has been awesome, Simon. Where can people go to connect with you? Obviously, the books are available right now on Amazon, and I think you have another title on the way. At least I've heard that through the grapevine. Is that correct?
I've got, I'm working on book 5, which I can't believe I thought I'd write 1 book, let alone 5. But yeah, I'm working on book 5 called The Infinite Game, which will come out sometime next year.
Can you give us a 30-second snippet on what that's going to be about?
Sure. If there are at least 2 competitors, you have a game. And there are 2 kinds of games. There's a finite game and an infinite game. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective, like football, right? And then you have an infinite game, which is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to perpetuate the game. When you put a finite player against a finite player, the system is stable. Football is stable. When you put an infinite player against an infinite player, the system is also stable. So the Cold War was stable because you cannot have a winner or a loser, so you keep the game in play. And what happens in infinite games is, because you cannot have a winner or a loser, people drop out when they run out of the will or the resources to play. But a new player will emerge. The game continues with or without you. Problems arise when you put a finite player against an infinite player, because finite players are playing to win and infinite players are playing to keep playing. So this is what happened to the United States in Vietnam. We were fighting to win. They were fighting for their lives. A very different set of strategic circumstances and strategic decisions that are going to be made. And eventually, America got in quagmire and dropped out of the game. Business is an infinite game. There's no such thing as winning the game of business, right? The game never ends. It is an infinite game. But if you listen to the language of most companies, they don't know what game they're in. They talk about being number one. They talk about being the best. Based on what metrics? Based on what timeframes? Who's agreed to those metrics and who's agreed to those timeframes? And what happens when you're number one? The game continues. In other words, it's all arbitrary. So you can never be number one. You can either be ahead or behind. And unfortunately, so many companies play to be number one by the end of the year that they actually make decisions that undermine the health and strength of their company to the point where they'll eventually fall out of the game, which is called bankruptcy or merger or acquisition for the most part. But the game perpetuates without you. And this became very clear to me when I gave a talk at an education summit for Microsoft, and I also gave a talk at an education summit for Apple. At the Microsoft summit, the vast majority of the executives spent all their time talking about how to beat Apple. Whereas at the Apple summit, the leaders were talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their cause. The other one was obsessed with their competition. Guess which one is in quagmire? It was Microsoft, because they were so busy being preoccupied with beating Apple that they literally, they didn't have a thing to pursue. That doesn't mean you ignore your competition, but you focus on them tactically, not strategically. So that's what I'm writing about.
That sounds freaking awesome. I cannot wait to read that. So very cool. That's something I've never, that's never occurred to me and something I've never heard anybody else talk about. So that sounds freaking amazing.
Thank you.
That's going to come out when?
Sometime next year.
Okay. All right. Very cool. I will definitely be getting a copy of that.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, so where can people, once again, go to connect with you, follow you on Twitter, check out your TED Talks? Obviously, there's Simon Sinek. Actually, that's not the right website. But startwithwhy.com, I think, is your primary hub. And is there anywhere else they should go to connect with you?
Yeah, it's all the usual places. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. SimonSinek.com is my blog. But yeah, all the usual places, and we try and keep things up to date and give away as much stuff as we can.
Awesome. Well, guys, go check out Simon's work. It's absolutely amazing. He's got the brand new book, Find Your Why, available out on Amazon. You are correct. I'm looking at it right now. It is available for $12 in paperback. And you've just made such a huge contribution to the world, Simon. Thank you so much for all of your work and passion around this mission of yours and for joining us here on Self-Made Man today.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks for giving me a platform to share my ideas. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening as always, and we'll see you next week. Take care.